Jesus said, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you are a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seeds. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours.' But his master replied, 'You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to the other one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" High up on the mountain of Meteora, Greece, is a collection of 6 monasteries that were built between the 14th and 16th century. And the highest and the largest one of these monasteries is the holy monastery of the great Meteoron. And it rests on the very tippy top of the mountain itself. Now, those who have taken the risks and been to the top report such magnificent views and such a profound quiet that they say as if they can feel God so closely that they can hear God breathing. Until recently, the only ways to access this particular monastery were by one of 2 ways. Either by climbing long ladders that were lashed together, or, for those who were less agile, they could ride in a suspended basket up a very steep cliff. Now, the basket itself was pulled to the top by several monks who would pull and tug with all their strength until the basket was up top. On one particular day, an observant tourist got exceedingly nervous when about halfway up she noticed that the rope by which she was suspending was old and fraying. Looking over the basket to the plummet below, and with a trembling voice, she asked the monk who was riding with her in the basket how often they changed the rope. Now the monk thought for a few moments and was silent, and then kind of shrugged and answered, "Whenever it breaks." Taking a suspended basket up a mountain pulled by ropes that are old and fraying is a risk, for sure. And most of the time, we intentionally avoid risk because we don't like risk. And if you were to ask me which I would prefer, the easy road with guaranteed outcomes or the risky path with no end in sight, I would like to say that I will choose the safe path every time. And yet, the older I get, And the more I've seen and done, I have realized that that is futile. I can't seem to escape risk. Now, some of these risks have been common, like leaving home for the first time, or trusting someone I've only just met. And some of my more riskier decisions, I still can't believe I've made. Like agreeing to serve with the Red Cross on the battlefields of Iraq, where people I never met really, really didn't like me. And if you've ever wondered, does a bright red cross on a white field make a fun target for others to shoot at? Well, it does. Yet I've also learned that with every risk I have taken, they have also been some of the most rewarding, the most deeply gratifying experiences of my life. For example, in Iraq, my willingness to go and to be there put me in a position to help or comfort others who may have not gotten what they needed. From sitting with soldiers so they wouldn't be alone as they take their last breaths, reward. Or helping a soldier navigate losing a loved one back at home and knowing that they would not be able to be there with their loved ones. Reward. I never, ever regretted the time that I was there. Not then, not now. And not because I'm anyone special, but because I was where I needed to be. I was where I needed to be in the moment, in the right place, at the right time. And I came to accept and appreciate that I was being guided and used by God to serve others. We all can have this. And I've also come to recognize that I often have more to lose by playing it safe than stepping out. I'm not alone in this. Think about it. Stepping out is difficult. Giving up our fears and how we treat others or how we want to be treated is difficult and it's risky. But stepping out of our comfort zones also means taking a leap of faith in letting God use you. Letting go of your fears and letting God put you where God needs you, even when the reward is not always immediately clear, or if there is a reward at all. Now, few great discoveries were made by playing it safe. Great ships were not built to cling the coastline. They're created to cross oceans. There's also absolutely no risk-free way to fall in love, and no risk-free way to raise children. And there's no risk-free way to mend broken relationships and make amends for past transgressions. And if we are to live into the gospel as we are called to do, and we truly want to improve our world and the lives around us, then we have to become comfortable with risk and letting go of our fears as we consider the needs of others. Living the gospel always involves risk. There is an inherent risk in saying these three simple words: I love you. It's a risk of vulnerability that some of us are not comfortable with. Asking for forgiveness or an offering to reconcile with someone who hurt you is such a risk. God has shown us great love, and God asks only that we share that love with others. When we take the risk to love, it is the grace of God working through us that does the heavy lifting. So let go of our fear. And living into the love of God happens through concrete actions toward others. Toward others, as we give as we have been given, and forgive as we have been forgiven. And these achievements of forgiveness, and reconciliation, and comforting, these achievements that we have been given a divine mandate to seek out, to explore, and to achieve, will come with a certain amount of risk. We might as well accept it. Risk is inherent. And just imagine with me for a moment, where would we be, or who would we be, if Jesus had stayed in his safe community of Nazareth? Imagine where we would be if Jesus had played it safe and never journeyed through the surrounding lands of Judea. Now imagine where the world would be if Jesus shared his precious gifts with just the people of Nazareth, that fly-speck know-nothing of a town in the middle of a desert. Jesus was the ultimate risk-taker. He was the risk-taker who calls us to join him. Jesus wants us to take chances, and if we don't, we will lose everything for sure. Not just in this morning's gospel, but that is just a fact that is throughout all the gospels. And that is what we're hearing in this morning's parable. The original hearers of this parable would have recognized right away the situation, because it was not unusual for rich landowners to entrust his slaves with significant responsibility. And a talent, at that time frame, was a very significant resource. And it was clear in Jesus' story that 5 talents or 2 talents or 1 talent was a lot of money that the master had entrusted the servants with. And in the parable, the first 2 servants doubled the master's money, and each was rewarded with more money. Not money for themselves. They didn't get a big payday. They were slaves. But each was given more money to invest for their master. And the reward for their faithfulness was more responsibility, more trust, more identity, and more self-awareness for them. And then comes along this last servant, and he bluntly tells the master, "Hey, I know that you're a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow," essentially calling him lazy, "and gathering where you did not scatter, seed, you bum. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. So here you have what is yours," and parentheticals, "you lazy bum." Now, the last servant risked nothing except for the way he talked to Jesus. He took what was entrusted to him and safely hid it. And there was little risk in digging a hole and hiding the loot. But there was also absolutely no potential for gain or reward. And for not taking any risk with the money entrusted to him, the servant gets the worst punishment possible as his reward, that famous great wailing and gnashing of teeth. I don't know what that is, but it sounds pretty horrible. And Jesus teaches us that our world was created for love. But we were also given the gift of free will, which means we have the freedom to do great evil as well as tremendous good. The choice is ours. And there's no other way. Because God has given us choice, and through our choices we can hurt ourselves, we can hurt others, or we can choose to do what is better. And that's why we strive every day, isn't it? That's what we seek. The better life. We seek to do better. Now, we also live in a universe where real love as an option is a risky place. And we see that pain and suffering is not only possible, but likely. And so, many of us start to wonder, why risk? Why try anything if we're only going to be punished? But that is just not true. Because the world of choice, of this world, founded on love, is also what makes possible all the noble acts of self-sacrifice. This world is not a world of pain and closed-offness and isolation and suffering. It's also a world of generosity, kindness, and self-sacrificial love. Because God has given us everything. We are a gift from God. Our minds, our hearts, our resources, our relationships, even the gift of today or of every moment of every day, God has given us. And God has invested so much love in us through Jesus' life and ministry, his death and his resurrection. Should we really feel scared? Should we really sit around and be terrified of saying to a stranger hello or inviting someone to join us? God has given us so much in this wonderful life. Should we sit around and feel guilty that he gave it for us? Now, we can never repay that love. And the good news is, the hope in this story is that we don't need to exactly have to repay Jesus back. We just have to pay it forward. God is not looking for a return on investment in quite the same way as the harsh landowner, but we do have an obligation, a privilege, of taking risks for God. Taking risks for God in our relationships, of how we treat others. And we should put every effort into pushing forward the value of the kingdom. We've been given the grace to witness the faith within us, and we've also been given the grace to take the risk and help others. Help others maybe giving instruction or providing shelter, and hopefully inviting others to join us. It is a risk we should take on completely, and one that has incredible and potential reward, even if it's not tomorrow, but there is reward in our actions. And each one of us in our baptism was given the gift of discipleship. And this involves our being prepared to be the life givers that Jesus calls us to do. We are being asked by Jesus to give ourselves up in selfless love for God and selfless love for everyone else and for this world in which we are seeking a better place, a better time, more peace, the world in which we are the stewards. Now, the fault of the person who did not use the gift he was given in the parable was that he was entirely passive, maybe even apathetic. He didn't want to take a risk because he didn't want to worry about what would happen to him if that risk failed. Apathetic is such a wonderful word because we can approach our faith apathetically. And without approaching our faith with risk, then we do risk being apathetic. The person was so frightened that he would lose what he had been given, not out of intention, not out of ignorance, but out of apathy and out of laziness. He assumed others would do what he was not. And therefore he was paralyzed by an awful fear to do nothing. The warning here is that the gift may be taken back, and this little statement flies against our popular notion of God. Surely our God wouldn't be so mean to give us something only to take it back. That is not the God we hear about in the gospel. That is not the God we know, love, and trust. But the warning comes from Jesus, so it is worth taking seriously. So the lesson is don't let your gifts go to waste. Don't let them go to waste out of fear of risking to be who you are called to be as disciples of Christ. And being ourselves as disciples of Christ is the risk we must all take, but taking in the comfort of God that already loves and accepts us unconditionally. So, what do we have to lose? What do we have to lose by taking a risk and opening ourselves up to a God who, as I said, unconditionally accepts and loves us already? Stepping out with this knowledge, how might you share the love of God with someone today? Who do you need to ask for forgiveness? Who do you need to forgive? In whom might you invest the risk of loving that God has shown you? What would you risk for love if you knew that you could never fail? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready to take God's given gifts and stop staring at the fraying ropes and turn your eyes to the mountaintop? The mountaintop, where you will find yourself in the presence of God so closely that you will hear God breathing. Amen.